The birthday party had ended the way most obligations end, quietly, with small clusters of people drifting toward their cars at nearly the same time, as if an unspoken agreement had finally been reached that nothing more needed to happen. It was just after 6 p.m. when Brandon and Renee stepped out into the cooling rural air, the light still holding on to the evening in a way that made everything feel slightly suspended rather than finished. They found themselves walking out alongside the same family whose child the party had been for, exchanging brief goodbyes under porch lights that softened everyone into something less defined than they had been inside. As they reached their car, Brandon glanced at the dashboard clock out of habit, registering the same time, 6:13 p.m., without attaching meaning to it yet. Behind them, another vehicle pulled out almost simultaneously, the family from the party leaving in near parallel, their headlights turning onto the same narrow rural road a few seconds ahead, placing both cars into the same sequence of departure, as if the night had quietly assigned them the same direction. When they finally left, the air had already begun to cool. Brandon drove. Renee sat beside him in a quiet that did not feel uncomfortable, only detached, as though the evening had not entirely released its hold on her yet. She watched the dark line of trees slip past the windows, their shapes too uniform to offer any sense of direction. The road was narrow and unfamiliar, drawn through countryside that seemed indifferent to their passage. There were no streetlights here, only the reach of headlights extending forward into an uncertain corridor of asphalt. After a time, Renee spoke. "How long until we're back on something that feels like a road again?" Brandon's eyes remained forward. "Not far now. Once we clear this stretch, it connects back to the highway." He said it with the quiet confidence of someone repeating information he had already accepted as fact. Yet when he glanced at the navigation screen, something resisted that certainty. There were no turns marked, no branching lines, no indication of change ahead. Only a single, uninterrupted path extending forward as though the world itself had been reduced to a simple line drawn in haste. He frowned slightly. "That's odd." Renee leaned a little closer. "What is?" "It's just showing straight road, nothing else." "Probably just poor signal out here," she said, though her voice carried no real concern. "Perhaps," he replied, though he did not sound convinced. The road itself offered little reassurance. It did not curve or break or suggest deviation. It simply continued, framed tightly by trees that seemed to lean inward just enough to make the space feel narrower than it was. Then, ahead, something appeared. A car, centered in their lane, moving at the same speed they were. Brandon noticed it before he understood it. Where did that come from? It did not behave like ordinary traffic. There was no hesitation in its movement, no adjustment to their presence, no sign that it had noticed them at all. It simply maintained its position with an almost deliberate precision, as though it were fixed in relation to them rather than the road. Brandon eased his foot slightly on the accelerator. The car ahead responded immediately, increasing its speed by the same margin. He slowed. It slowed. A quiet unease began to settle in the space between them, though neither of them yet named it. Renee broke first. "That isn't normal driving." "No," Brandon said softly, as if agreement alone might contain it. Behind them, headlights emerged. At first they were distant, almost incidental, like the suggestion of another vehicle far back along the road. But gradually they grew brighter, more insistent, their presence pressing forward in intermittent flashes. Brandon glanced at the mirror. "There's someone behind us now as well." Renee turned in her seat. The headlights behind were strong enough to flatten the darkness, but still too far to reveal form. Only light, advancing with a persistence that felt less like travel and more like pursuit. Then the brake lights of that vehicle flared briefly. The road behind them was washed in red, and in that brief illumination, something stood just beyond the shoulder. A figure. Not on the road, not moving into it, but standing slightly apart from it, where the light barely reached. It was human in outline only, enough to suggest height, posture, presence, but not enough to grant detail. It did not approach. It did not retreat. It simply stood, watching them pass. Renee turned forward at once. "What was that?" she asked, though the question already felt too late to matter. Brandon did not answer immediately. When he looked again, the brake lights had dimmed. The figure was no longer visible, but the impression it left behind did not leave with it, and the road ahead, as if in response, seemed suddenly longer than it had been before.
Brandon and Renee did not notice the exact moment the drive stopped feeling like a journey. It was not marked by a turn or a sign or any interruption that could be pointed to afterward and named as the beginning. Instead, it arrived quietly, as most distortions of certainty do, through repetition that was almost, but not quite, the same. The sound of the tires became more noticeable as the night deepened. The old rock surface beneath them gave a faint, uneven rhythm, each rotation of rubber meeting rough asphalt and sending a soft echo outward into the dark countryside. It carried through the trees on either side of the road and returned again, slightly delayed, as though the night itself were listening and repeating them back. At first it was only sound, then it became feeling. The car ahead remained. It held its distance with a kind of unnatural discipline, neither gaining nor falling back, fixed in place as though it had been assigned a position rather than a destination. Brandon watched it longer than he intended to, waiting for it to make the small errors that all moving things eventually make. It did not. Behind them, the second set of headlights continued as well, steady, patient, always there when checked, never closer than it should be, and never far enough to disappear. Renee shifted slightly beside him. "Do you remember a turn coming up soon?" she asked. Brandon hesitated before answering, not because he did not know, but because the confidence he had carried earlier no longer felt as reliable as it once had. "There should be a junction," he said, "after this stretch." But even as he spoke, the words felt like they belonged to an earlier version of the drive, one that had already begun to drift out of reach. He checked the GPS again. The screen offered no correction, no reassurance, only a single unbroken line extending forward, as though the world had narrowed itself into one possibility and refused to acknowledge the existence of others. Brandon frowned. "That doesn't make sense," he said quietly. Renee leaned in. "What doesn't?" "It's not showing anything except straight road." She studied it for a moment. "Maybe it's just not loading right out here." "Maybe," he said, though the answer no longer felt complete even as he said it. The road continued without variation. Trees pressed in closer than they should have, not physically changing, but visually enclosing the space in a way that made distance feel compressed. The night beyond the headlights did not feel like absence anymore. It felt like containment. Then, ahead, something shifted. The car in front slowed. Not abruptly. Not in a way that suggested danger or hesitation. It simply reduced its speed with careful precision, as though adjusting itself to an unseen instruction. Brandon instinctively matched it.
Car ahead resumed its exact distance. A quiet unease settled between them, though neither of them yet named it. Renee spoke first. "That car isn't normal," she said. "No," Brandon replied, softly, as if agreement might keep it from becoming more real. Behind them, the headlights remained unchanged. Ahead, the car remained unchanged. The road itself gave no indication that anything had altered, and yet everything within it felt subtly misaligned, like a photograph that had been copied too many times. Brandon could not say how long they had been driving. The mind usually relied on small confirmations, turns, landmarks, changes in sound, but none of those existed here in any reliable form. Only continuation. And then, without warning, the wreck appeared again. A car in the ditch, crushed front end, glass scattered into the grass, stillness where motion should have recently existed. Brandon slowed. Renee did not speak immediately. This time she watched it without turning away. When they passed it, the sound of the tires on the rock road seemed louder, more aware of itself, echoing into the dark countryside, and returning again as if the road were repeating them on purpose. After a moment, Renee spoke quietly. "That's the same one," she said. Brandon kept his eyes forward. "I I don't think it can be, he replied, though he did not sound certain enough for the words to hold weight. Behind them, the wreck disappeared into darkness. Ahead of them, the car remained. And between those two fixed points, the road continued to insist that nothing had changed at all. It was only then, without needing to name it, that Brandon began to understand something he did not yet want to fully accept. They were not simply traveling through distance, they were moving through something that behaved like distance but did not obey it. And whatever it was, it had already decided where they would remain. The time the thought entered either of their minds, it no longer felt like something new. It felt like something they had been circling for a while without admitting it. The road had stopped behaving like a passage forward. It still looked like one, still stretched ahead beneath the headlights in a narrow, obedient line, but nothing about it carried the certainty of direction anymore. Even the sound had begun to change, though neither of them could say exactly when. The tires on the old rock surface no longer felt like simple motion. Each rotation seemed to echo too clearly into the night, returning from the trees on either side of the road with a slight delay, as though the road itself were repeating them back a fraction after they had already passed. Brandon noticed it first in the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of relief. Renee broke it. "Do you remember passing that already?" Her voice was calm, but it was not uncertain. Brandon did not answer immediately. His eyes remained forward, fixed on the car ahead, which still maintained its impossible distance. That alone might have been enough to dismiss her question earlier in the night, but not anymore. "I don't know what you mean," he said carefully. "The wreck," she replied. "I saw it again. I remember it. We already passed it." A small tightening formed in his chest, though he tried not to give it shape. "That's just another one," he said. "Out here, people hit deer all the time. There's no reason it has to be the same." He stopped himself, because even as he spoke, he could feel how thin the explanation sounded inside the car. Renee turned toward him slightly now. "You didn't look at it," she said. "I did," he answered too quickly. "No," she said softly. "You didn't really look." Behind them, the headlights remained unchanged. Ahead, the car remained unchanged. But the space between those 2 points no longer felt stable. It felt like something that had been measured once and was no longer being checked. Brandon checked the mirror. A habit now. Not reassurance, just repetition. The wreck was gone behind them. But the absence of it did not feel like progress. It felt like erasure. He exhaled slowly. "We should be hitting the junction soon," he said, though the words no longer carried the certainty they once had. Renee did not respond. The GPS remained unchanged, a single line forward, no branches, no turns, no acknowledgement that alternatives had ever existed. The tires continued their rhythm on the old rock road, that uneven sound carrying out into the dark countryside and returning again faintly altered, as though the night had begun to learn their pattern and was now practicing it back incorrectly. And then, without warning, the car ahead slowed. It was not abrupt. It was worse than that. It was precise, deliberate enough to feel chosen. Brandon reacted instantly, easing off the accelerator, but this time the response from the car ahead came almost immediately, restoring the distance as if correcting an imbalance. A mistake corrected before it could fully occur. Renee noticed his hesitation. "That's not normal," she said. Brandon swallowed. "No." Behind them, the headlights held steady. But now, when he looked into the mirror, he could no longer convince himself they were passive. They felt present in a different way. Attentive. As if the road behind them was no longer simply following, but participating. A moment passed. Then another. And then Renee spoke again, quieter now. "I don't think we've been moving forward." Brandon's grip tightened. "That's not possible," he said, but it sounded less like refusal and more like repetition. The wreck appeared again. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It was simply there, as if it had never left at all. Brandon did not speak this time. He only stared at it as they passed. And something inside him shifted, not into panic yet, but into recognition that the mind was no longer reliable in the way it used to be. A few seconds passed after it disappeared behind them. Then Renee spoke, barely above a whisper. "That's the same one." This time, Brandon did not answer, because answering would have required choosing between explanations that no longer felt meaningfully different. The road continued, the tires continued, the headlights continued, and somewhere inside the repetition of all three, something subtle broke loose. Brandon slowed. At first it was unconscious, then deliberate, then sudden. The car rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute, as if even the sound of the tires had been waiting for permission to stop. Renee turned sharply toward him. "Brandon, what are you doing?" He did not answer, not because he refused to, but because there was nothing in him structured enough yet to respond. The engine idled. The night pressed in, and for the first time the road did not feel like it was moving beneath them. It felt like it was waiting. Brandon shifted into reverse. The motion was slow at first, almost cautious, as though the car itself understood the weight of what it was doing. The world behind them unfolded backward in silence. Trees, road, darkness, all returning in reverse order, as if time itself had begun to lose preference for direction. And then the wreck appeared. Again, behind them now. Closer, undeniably the same. Brandon leaned forward slightly, eyes locked into the mirror. "There," he said quickly. "That's it. That's the same one. I told you." His voice rose, not in volume, but in urgency, as if proving it might stabilize it. He reversed closer, closer. The wreck filled more of the mirror now, its shape becoming too familiar to dismiss, too exact to rationalize away. And then, he looked out the window, just to confirm it, just to anchor it in something physical. There was nothing. No ditch, no wreck, no broken metal, only empty roadside, stretching clean into the dark line of trees as if nothing had ever disturbed it. Brandon froze. The engine continued idling in reverse. In the mirror, the wreck remained perfectly visible. In reality, it did not exist at all. And for the first time since leaving the party, he did not try to explain what he was seeing. He only stopped trusting that there was a difference between the mirror and the road. The decision to continue forward did not feel like a decision anymore. It felt like momentum, something already in motion that neither of them had authored, only inherited. The road returned beneath them exactly as before. The tires resumed their rhythm on the old rock surface, that uneven sound once again echoing into the dark countryside and returning slightly altered, as if the road had learned them too well to reproduce them accurately. Neither of them spoke for a while. Not because there was nothing to say, but because anything said now felt like it might be recorded. Then suddenly, the road changed. Not in shape, in permission. A turn appeared on the right side of the road, clear, deliberate, undeniable. A road sign stood beside it, reflective in the headlights, confirming what neither of them had seen before. An exit that suggested the straight line they had been trapped in had never been absolute. Brandon slowed instinctively. Renee leaned forward slightly. "That wasn't there," she said. Brandon didn't answer. The sight of it created a pressure in his chest he couldn't place yet, not relief, something closer to disbelief arriving too late to stop the body from reacting. Behind them, the road felt different now, less oppressive. The headlights no longer pressed forward with the same strange insistence they had carried moments before. The stretch, whatever it had been, felt like it was loosening its grip. Brandon turned the wheel. They took the turn. The tires left the old rock surface and moved onto a narrower road that felt different immediately, not in appearance but in consequence. As if the world had started allowing alternatives again. The silence changed. Not gone, but less dense. Renee exhaled slowly beside him. "I think we're out," she said. Brandon didn't respond right away. The car continued forward down the new road. For the first time in what felt like too long, distance began to feel real again. Measurable, understandable, ordinary. And then, Brandon looked at the dashboard clock. He frowned. "What?" Renee asked. He stared at it longer. "It says 6:35 p.m., he said quietly. She leaned in immediately. The display did not change. Brandon shook his head slightly. "That's not possible." Renee's voice tightened. "What do you mean?" "We were gone longer than that," he said. "It was hours. It had to be hours." But even as he said it, the words felt unstable, like they belonged to a version of time that no longer had permission to exist. The road ahead remained calm, almost ordinary, too ordinary. And then, behind them, headlights. Brandon checked the mirror. A car was approaching, fast, too familiar in shape to ignore. It closed the distance behind them, then passed on the opposite side of the road as if they were not moving at all. Renee turned her head slightly and went still. Brandon did too. It was one of the cars from the party, the same departure, the same road, the same night. It passed them without slowing, as if they were no longer part of its timeline, as if they had been removed from the order of things. Renee sat back slowly. "They're ahead of us," she said quietly. Brandon didn't answer, but he kept watching the mirror, long after the car disappeared into the road ahead. Because the unsettling part was not that they had only been gone 22 minutes, it was that something else still believed time had moved forward normally. And something else, something on that road, had not agreed.